Ches.
Okay, we're up to Daf Ches Amr Aleph. The second line. Let me review. By the way, today's Daf is very interesting. When you get to the Mishnah to the end, I looked it over very quickly Shabbos morning, and I was like, it sounds very familiar. It's word for word. The entire Daf is Gittin Pei Chav Zayin. Word for word. So I listened to the recording. I didn't prepare it. I just listened to myself for Chav Zayin. I was like, okay, it's very easy. It's word for word. No changes. Word for word. So just to get to the Mishnah, just to review what we're talking about. So what we're talking about is as follows. There's a Rabbi Yochanan started this conversation on Yud Zayin Amud Beis by saying that if a woman claims that she's owed the ksuba, even if she doesn't have the ksuba, you have to pay, and the husband can't say parati, because it's a chiyuv ma'isa bezdin, and because it's a chiyuv that stems from bezdin, it has the power of a shtar, even if she doesn't have the shtar. Fine. So they said to Rav Yochanan, I thought it's Mefurish Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Haitziyu get, if you have a get and you don't have a ksuba, you have to pay. So you see, you have to pay even without the ksuba. Abaye said like this. There's two ways to read the Mishnah, and this is very important of how Abaye said it. Dilma b'makam she'en koisvin ksuva askinan. Abaye said perhaps the Mishnah does not mean. You see, the point of the Mishnah could be two ways. You could say from the Mishnah that nowadays, Bisman Hazeh, that we write a ksuba, if a woman loses her ksuba, she could still collect. That's one way to read it, and that's how Rav Yochanan holds. Abaye says you could look at the Mishnah differently. The Mishnah was only talking about a case where they didn't write ksubas, meaning in a time period of history where they didn't write ksubas, or in a location where they never wrote a ksuba, and what did they have? They had a get. So in such a location, you could collect without the ksuba. But in a zman where they write ksubas, if you don't have it, you don't. So there's two ways to look at it. Abaye said at first, perhaps the Mishnah only means you could collect if you don't have a ksuba when they never wrote a ksuba. But if they write ksubas, you need a ksuba. Then Abaye says, Hadar Amar Abaye, then Abaye said, I changed my mind. Okay, now here's what we're trying to figure out. Why did he change his mind? He said, I changed my mind. It can't be that the Mishnah is talking about where there is no ksuba. It means the Mishnah must be telling across the board, you could always collect without the ksuba. Not just in a zman where you don't have the ksuba. You could always collect. Why did Abaye change his mind? So we said yesterday, perhaps Abaye changed his mind because of the following. If Abaye, again, the first way Abaye is reading the Mishnah, you could only collect the ksuba if you have the ksuba. The Mishnah says you could collect. It's in a place where they didn't write ksubas. But Bisman is there, where you wrote a ksuba, you need the ksuba. Abaye said, I changed my mind. You could collect the ksuba always, with or without a ksuba. Why? So we're trying to figure out why he changed his mind. So the first possibility, we said yesterday, perhaps he changed his mind because if you need a ksuba to collect, then how does an almanim and an erison ever get a ksuba? Almanim and an erison, they never wrote ksubas for. And if you need a ksuba, how are you going to collect? So that brought us down a little bit of a side point. How do you know that an almanim and an erison gets a ksuba? This whole assumption that Abaye changed his mind because an almanim and an erison, how does she gets a ksuba? How? She doesn't have a ksuba to collect. It must be that you get a ksuba, you collect without the ksuba. How do you know that almanim and erison collects b'chlal? Maybe there's no ksuba for almanim and erison. So that's what we're in the middle. We're trying to figure that out. So 2 lines into the page, Daf Yud Ches, the Gemara says, Elamid Detani Rav Chiya bar Ami. We're looking for a source that almanim and erison collects a ksuba. So it's from the following brisa. The brisa says, Ishtei erisa, you have a wife who's an erisa, and then there's a death. Loi oinen, there's no aninus for a wife after kedushin. There's no aninus. Oh, okay, fine. Loi oinen, there's no aninus, meaning that all the heterim of aninus and the halachas of aninus do not apply if your wife is just kedushin. V'loi metamela, if he's a kohen, he does not contaminate to a wife just after kedushin if she dies. V'chein, and if the husband dies after kedushin, he loi oinenes, she doesn't have the laws of aninus. V'loi metames lo, she doesn't have to be metame. There's no mitzvah for her to be metame. There's no issa for her metame. There's no chiyuv for her to metame because they're not really married in that regard. Mesa, if she dies after kedushin, ein a yarsha, he doesn't collect her yerusha. Meisu, and if he dies, goyve ksuva, so she collects the ksuba. Pretty clear that almanim and erison collects the ksuba. The Gemara says dilma de kasavla. How do you know that that's a proof? Maybe that specific case where it says you collect the ksuba is where he wrote a ksuba for her after kedushin, before kedushin. Meaning, maybe generally you don't collect the ksuba after kedushin. This case specifically, he wrote the ksuba. He wrote the ksuba before, but in general, where they don't, you don't collect. So that's not a proof. And then you'll tell me, and if you'll say, well, if the case is that he specifically wrote the ksuba before kedushin, then what's the chiddush? You're right. Mesa in the yarshit, that wouldn't be needed. It's just in there for the other halachas in the brisa would be the chiddush, and that would just be thrown in tangentially. So therefore, there's no makar that an almanim erisin actually collects the ksuba. So here's what we do. Because of this, let's change everything we've been doing till now. Abaye had two ways to read the Mishnah. First, he read the Mishnah that you could only collect the ksuba if you actually have a ksuba. Then he says, Hadar Amar Abaye, I take it back. Meaning, Abaye said again, the Mishnah says you collect without the ksuba. Abaye says maybe that was only when they didn't write ksubas because you had a get. But nowadays that they have ksubas, if you lose a ksuba, you can't collect. Hadar Amar Abaye, Abaye says, no, you always collect with or without the ksuba. I changed my mind. Why did he change his mind? So we first thought he changed his mind because Almanim and Erisin, how does she ever collect? The answer is maybe she doesn't collect. So why did he change his mind? Ella Abaye meguva de masisa kadave. You want to know why Abaye changed his mind? It's the isol gedaitach b'makom shein koisev ksuva askinon to get hainu ksuvasa or to get mana masayim ksiva. I'll tell you why. I'll say it outside, then we'll see it inside. The reason why Abaye changed his mind is because he felt that it's unlikely. There's two ways to read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you could collect the ksuba without ksuba. One way to read it, which is Abaye's original understanding, is that it's talking about a zman where they didn't write ksubas. So what do you have? You have a get. So you put the get, you get the ksuba money. Then Abaye says, no. It means even if you lost a ksuba, you could always collect. You want to know why he didn't like the first pshat? A get is not a ksuba. You're telling me it's an izman where there's no ksuba. So how do you collect? But you have your get. What shaykhs does the get have? Meaning you're going to have to go, eventually you're going to have to get to the point where you could collect with or without a ksuba. Because if you're saying, no, really, if you wrote a ksuba, you need a ksuba. So how do you collect? They didn't write a ksuba in that city. That's it, they didn't write ksubas. You have the get. What shaykhs does the get have?
And in the case of there's no.
Correct. But also, what shaykhs does the get have? So the guy will just claim he paid. There's no way to protect the person. It says the Gemara like this. Ought to get mana masayim siva. Does it say any monetary financial responsibilities in the get? No. And if you'll say, well, because she has the get, then that you could be used to collect the ksuba. Then why can't he just say he already paid it up? Meaning, you have to protect the woman. And if you're telling me that she has to give something, so if she has the ksuba, she needs the ksuba. If she doesn't have the ksuba, at least give the get. Then what's to stop the guy from just saying he already paid? So what's the answer? She shows up with the get. You say you have to give her the money. Why can't he just say I already paid? Says the Gemara.
You have to show some documentation that you paid.
Huh?
You have to show some documentation that you paid.
No, she says that he owes her the money. Why should he have to prove it? The onus should be on her. And if you say that we'll tell the husband, so we're not going to have a taina like my father says that he should have to prove. But the Gemara says you should probably rip up. You see, normally, if I have a shtar that says you owe me $100, when you give me the money, you take the shtar and you rip it up. So the Gemara says, what are you going to tell him to do that? He should have ripped up her get? That's not good. Why? The Gemara says, because he's going to say she didn't let me rip up the get, but because she needs to remarry. So what? Meaning, in other words, you have to just say at some point, you have to just say the get cannot serve, because if a get could serve as the financial responsibility, first, it doesn't have any information in it. Second of all, then he should rip it up. And what is and she's not going to let. And then the Gemara said, well, you know what we should say to him? If you paid, you should have ripped up the get, and then right on the back, I ripped it up, not because it's a bad get, but because I already paid. Says the Gemara, Atu called the Megave Beidin Megave, what we're dealing with big rabbanim. You think the average woman would let her husband rip it up and think that you could write on the back? No chance. So therefore, you can't, if the get, if a woman will be able to collect only with a document, then at some point he's going to be able to say, I paid. And there's no taina on him. Because what are we going to say? You should have ripped up the get? He's not going to let you rip up the get. So it can't just be that he could just claim you paid. So it must be that with or without a ksuba, she could collect.
You can't just write on the back of the get?
No.
See on the back?
No.
Without tearing?
No. Because then she'll just reuse it. Meaning, that's the point. If she's using the get in lieu of a ksuba, then she'll just keep on using it. It must be that it has nothing to do with the get. Huh?
They stamp. They both write on the back. He writes on the back.
She'll say it's forged.
That's paper.
That's the point. The point is that's why because of this, you just collect the ksuba and you better pay in front of Adam. That's in a situation where there's no ksuba. That's what you should do. Yeah. Okay, that's the end of the Gemara. Now, from here into the end, like I said, is mamish mafurish in Gittin Chav Zayin. I think I probably explained it better then. I listened to it. So let's do the Mishnah. Mishnah says like this: Matzah gitei nashim, you find a get, shichra avodim, emancipation bill for avodim, daitiki, a will, matana, a document that says you're giving someone a gift, shoivrin, a receipt, harei zalayach, so you can't return it. Why? Shani oimer kesuvin hayu v'nimach alein shalin lena, because maybe they were written and they were never delivered. Right? You find them, it might have been a draft. So if you find a get, right, you find a get on the street that says, Chaim is divorcing Sarah, who are you going to give it to? You're going to give it to Sarah? Normally she holds on to the get because she's divorced. Maybe he never gave it to her. And you're divorcing his wife. And you're going to give it to him? Maybe he actually gave it to her and now he can mess her up. And because of this, because we don't know if it was actually ever used, you just can't give it. Okay, fine. Here is the point that's going to take us till the end of the daf. The implication is that if I find a get on the street, the reason why I cannot give it to the wife is she always holds on to the get. A woman who's divorced has her get. So why don't we give it to the wife? Because maybe he never delivered it. Or maybe he never wrote it and never didn't want to deliver it, never delivered it, right? Let's say we find it. I go to the husband and I'm like, hey, did you ever give this get to your wife? He's like, I actually never did. But yeah, let's use it. Yeah, I'm cool. Give it. You could give it. The whole problem is maybe it was never delivered. But now if he gives you permission to deliver it, sure. No matter how long it's been since he dropped it. And you see from here, we are not concerned of two people with the same names dropping the same document in the same location. That's the point. Meaning, I find a document that says Avram is divorcing Sarah in Queens, New York. And again, they didn't have last names. So you go to the only Avram you know, and he's only married to the only Sarah you know, and you say, hey, I found this get. So the Gemara says, you can't just deliver without speaking to him because maybe he never delivered it to his wife, and you're the one giving it to his wife. But you knock on his door. The implication of the Mishnah is, if you knock on his door, you say, hey, can I give it to your wife? And he's like, yeah, actually, I wrote it, I never delivered it. Yeah, my life's pretty miserable once you deliver it. So the halacha is, you could. And we're not concerned that in that same spot, because it's been a while, he says, I dropped it there 2 weeks ago. Like, okay, fine, but you're the Avram, you're the Sarah, then fine. We're not worried about two Avrams and two Sarahs having the same document dropped in the same location. The problem is a mission in Gittin that says that we are concerned. And that's the chiluk. Are we concerned that this document, it's legit, and we're not concerned of a forgery? The question is, are we concerned that in the same location, two people with the same names drop the same document in the same location? That's the point. Says the Gemara, and the whole reason why you can't give the get is because we're afraid he never delivered it. But if you go over to the husband and say, hey, I found this get, you dropped it. He's like, yeah, I dropped it 2 weeks ago. Can I give it to your wife? So, and if he says yes, then you could give it. Nice, and I feel zman meruba, even if it's been weeks, and we're not concerned that multiple people with the same name dropped in the same location. Says the Gemara, many have a contradiction from a sugya in the Mishnah Gittin Chav Zayin says, "Hamevi get avim mimenu." If a shliach loses the get, matzul alter kosher. If you find it right away, kosher, because in that time span, where it's unlikely that two people drop the same get in the same spot. But imlav, if you find it a week later, it's possible. Because in that week, we're afraid two people dropped the same get with the same names in the same spot. So are we concerned of that or not? It's a contradiction. So says Rabbi, loy kasha, kan b'makom shashayaris mitzuyos, kan b'makom she'ein hashayaris mitzuyos. The question is, how busy is the city that you dropped it in? If you dropped it in a shtetl, the likelihood in that shtetl of multiple people with the same names dropping the get in the same spot is very unlikely. When is it a problem? In a place like Brooklyn, a place like Manhattan, where there's a lot of people flying through, then it's an issue. So Rabbi would tell you, is it a problem? Are we concerned that two people with the same name, the same spot? Rabbi would say, it really depends on how busy of a location it is. But, says the Gemara, one more issue. Not only does it have to be a busy location, it has to be that the city of the name of the get, we know that there's multiple people with the same name. Let me explain. Even Rabbi says that it's an issue in a very busy location where you found the get. Let me explain. According to Rabbi, I'm in Manhattan, right? A very busy location, Times Square. I find a get on the floor. It says, Avi is divorcing Chana in Queens. I dropped it 2 weeks ago. The shliach dropped it 2 weeks ago. It's a problem. Why? Because maybe in that same spot, two people dropped two different documents with the same names. I'm picking up the wrong name. Here's the thing, though. There's two things that you need. You need it to be a busy location where they dropped it, but it still says that the get was written in Queens. So in addition for it to be busy, I also have to be that in Queens, there's two Avis married to two Chanas. Meaning, so there's two things that you need for it to be an issue. It has to be that it's a very busy spot. There could be multiple people dropping get in the same spot. But even if there are multiple people dropping get in the same spot, you got to look at the names and look at the city. It just because you dropped it in Manhattan doesn't mean it was written in Manhattan. So it was written in Brooklyn, yeah? And it says Avi and Chana. So for it to be an issue, that means that there has to be a possibility of two Avis and two Chanas being married in Brooklyn. If you know that there are two Avis married to two Chanas in the city of Brooklyn, then it's a problem. If not. Back then, I don't know. The point is, if it's huxaku, if it's common knowledge that there's two people with the same married to the same wife's name, fine. But if not. Because by the way, if it has to be muhsik. No, it has to be known. It has to be known. Now, by the way, because I'll be honest, if let's say in Queens there's only one Avi married to a Chana, so then it doesn't matter how busy Manhattan is. You find a document, it says in Queens, Avi divorced Chana. Well, what are you concerned about? The only concern could be that there's two cities named Queens. You understand? You'd have to expand it because that city itself doesn't have two Avis and Chanas. It'd have to be that there's two Queens. Yeah, but no. By the way, there are cities there are many Hartfords. You know what I'm saying? There are many New Havens. You know what I mean? How you doing, buddy? So the point is like this. So says the Gemara, for it to be an issue, Rabbi first says that it has to be that it's a busy location where it was dropped, and secondly, it has to be that the city that has the name of where it was dropped, the city of the writing, has two people by the same name in the same location. So according to Rabbi, you need both for it to be a problem. Busy location where it was dropped, and the place where it was written have to have two names, two husbands, two wives, the same name. Why? Because if you don't need both, then we have a contradiction in Rabbah. Right? Why? Because Rabbah, we're going to see in a moment, Rabbah was lenient. If there was no two Yosef and Shimon's in the same location, he was lenient, even if it was busy. So you see that Rabbah himself, Lishitasai, needs both for it to be a problem. It has to be that it was dropped or found in a busy location, and it has to be that the place where it was written has two Yosef and Shimon's married to two Chanas, whatever it is. The Gemara says, I'll prove it to you. They found a get in Rav Huna's courthouse. Now, a courthouse was a busy location. It's like the city, because you got people coming through there all day long. So they found a get in a busy location. And in the get, it says as follows. It was written in Shviri, a city called Shviri, Masa Dal Rochis Nara, a town on the river Rochis, on the Rochis River. So it says, now in that city, Shviri, there were no two couples with the same names in Shviri. Now, it was found in a busy location. So yes, it could have been multiple people dropped different shtaris in the same spot. But it says it was written in Shviri. And let's say it was Chaim divorced Chana in Shviri. There is no two Chaims married to two Chanas in Shviri. So there's only one thing. So what's the halacha? So it says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, go to the next page. Chayshina l'shei Shviri. Rav Huna says it's a problem. There's no two people in that city of Shviri. The answer is maybe the two Shviris. Rav Huna felt that all you need is one of them to make it a problem. You need it to either be busy or to have, you don't need busy plus two people with the same names. You just need busy. As long as it was found in a busy location, possible two different documents are dropped in the same spot over time. It says Shviri, and Shviri doesn't have multiple sets with the same name. Maybe there's two Shviris. Comes Rabbah, Amalei Rav Chizla Rabbah. Rav Chizla said to Rabbah, Pukayba, let's look into this. Rav Huna, because Rav Huna is going to ask us about this that night. So, they looked into it before they spoke to Rav Huna. Rabba's opinion is that you could return it. Meaning, Rabba L'shitase holds that for it to be a problem, it needs to be a busy location, and in the place of the writing, it has to have that you know that there are two couples with the same names. And this courthouse, while it's a busy location, Shviri did not have two couples. Says the Gemara. Rav Huna's courthouse, it's a busy location. The kapasha Rabbi diachzer, but Rabbi still said it's fine. Why? Alma yihochzik sheyosef ben Shimon ini loy loy. You see that Rabbi holds that you need, for it to be a problem, you need both. You need to find the document in a busy location, so it's possible multiple people dropped it, and it has to be that the name where it was written is muchzik of multiple Yosef ben Shimons. Okay. Ovid Rabba Uvdei, Beikisna de Pumpadisa. Rabba himself, Paskind, they found a get in a flax house in Pumpadisa, and he Paskind that it's fine. Now, what was the case? The case is Ikada Amri Hecha de Mizavni Kisna. Some say that the get was found in a place where they sold flax. Now, where you sell flax, that's very busy. It's a marketplace, so it's very busy. And the reason why he was lenient is because he holds you need both. And that place only had one. It only had busy. It didn't have the two Yosef and Shimons. And some say no. The case was that there actually was two Yosef and Shimons in that city. So why was he lenient? It wasn't where they sold flax. It's where they soaked flax. Soaking flax smells a lot. So there's not a lot of people there. So again, it's the same thing that Rabbi needs both to trigger the issue. Okay. Now, just to review, what this has been is our Mishnah implied, at least the way you could read the Mishnah, that if you find a get, you don't return it because we're afraid it was never delivered. But if a week later you find the husband, you say, hey, you want me to give the get? He's like, yeah, sure, give it. We're not concerned that multiple people drop the same get in the same location. There's a brisa, that's a Mishnah in Metziah. There's a brisa, there's a Mishnah. Mishnah in Metziah is a contradiction of Mishnah in Gittin, and the answer is you need both. Okay, fine. Rav Zera has the exact same back and forth, but instead of asking from a Mishnah in Metziah to the Mishnah in Gittin, he asked from a brisa to a Mishnah in Gittin. So and same question, same answer. But instead of Mishnah to Mishnah, he goes Brisa to Mishnah. Okay? Rav Zera Rami Masis and a Brisa. Rav Zera made a contradiction between a Brisa and a Mishnah. Tanan, it says in the Mishnah quoted above, maybe give up any menu matzal to kashim la pasol. The Mishnah in Gittin implies that you cannot return a get if you lost it after a while because maybe in the time period someone else dropped it with the same names. Or many, I have a contradiction from the following Brisa. The Brisa says matzah get isha b'shuk. If you find a get in the marketplace, if the husband says that's mine, yachzer, you could return it. Even though it's been a while, we're not concerned of multiple people dropping in the same location. But if the husband does not admit that he divorced his wife, if he doesn't admit, then you can't return it because you don't know who to return it to. You give it to the wife, maybe they weren't divorced. You give it to the husband, maybe they were divorced, and therefore, if they're not on the same page, you can't deliver it. But you see from this brisa that we're not concerned of multiple people dropping it in the same location. So it's a contradiction. Katani miyas bizman shabal ma'idi yachsel isha avilus ma'meruba. So that's the contradiction. Same answer. Umishani kan be'amakom sheyaris mitzuyos kan makom she'ena yaris mitzuyos. Answer number one is that there's a difference between the location being busy or not. If it's busy, it's likely that people dropped it. If it's not, not. And ikadamri, some add that second caveat that we said. Some add that second teaching of Rabbi that for it to be an issue, it has to be busy and two people with the same name in the same city. And some people don't require that second one, and that's like Rav Zera. The point is, so Rav Zera had the same back and forth, but instead of a Mishnah, he asked a Mishnah of Brisa. So the question is, I understand why Rabbi didn't say like Rav Zera. Why did Rabbi not like Rav Zera? If I have a choice to make a contradiction between a Mishnah and a Mishnah and a Brisa and a Mishnah, I choose Mishnah and a Mishnah every day. Mishnah is more accurate. So he picked Mishnah because that's more accurate. Ela Rav Zera, my time like Rabba. Why did Rav Zera not say like Rabba? So says the Gemara. Why did Rav Zera not say like Rabba? So the Gemara says like this. Meaning Rav Zera chose to use a contradiction between a brisa. Why not pick the Mishnah? The answer is very simple. The Mishnah never says what you think it says. It's your implication. What does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says that if you find a get, you don't return it because maybe it was never delivered. We're implying that means that if the husband wants us to deliver it, we could, even if it was found weeks later. Maybe not. Maybe the Mishnah means that you could deliver it if it was found right away. The Mishnah never says you could deliver it if it's weeks later, we're not concerned in the interim. That the Mishnah never says. The Mishnah just says, if you find a get, you can't give it to the wife because maybe the husband never delivered it. So we deduce from this, but if the husband's cool with us giving it to the wife, we could. And even if it was found weeks later, maybe not. Who says that that's true? Maybe it's only if you found it right away. The Mishnah is not dealing with, the point is, our Mishnah is not dealing with that sugya. That sugya is, are we concerned with multiple people dropping in the same spot? Our Mishnah is just dealing with maybe it was never delivered. It's two separate things. So the Gemara says, Amalach mikatani amatunu noisin afilzman ruba del mamar tunu noisin the oilam mikadakaim altar. Maybe the Mishnah means you can just deliver it right away. It's not clear from the Mishnah. Now, one quick point, and then we'll give two other answers. Lamanda Omer le Rav Zera b'makom shesheris mitzuyas avagav shaloi hochzuk shnei Yosef ben Shimon upliga de Rabba b'maika miflagi. So Rabba holds for it to be an issue. I need two things. I need it to be that I found the document in a busy location, and the place where it was written has two couples with the same name. Rav Zera holds all you need is for it to be a busy location. He doesn't need two couples with the same name. So what's the machlokes? Rabba savar diktani kol ma'isa bezdin yachzer. You know what the machlokes is? Very interesting. The Mishnah says that you could return a Maisa Bezdin. Now, a Maisa Bezdin, Pashtus means a document found in court. Now, courts were very busy, and it says you could return it. Why? So it says Rabbah, you see, busy's not enough. I need busy, and I need, because if it's busy was enough to be an issue, why do you return it? So it must be busy plus two people with the same name in the same city. Rav Zera says, it never says you found it in Bezdin. It says Maisa Bezdin. Maisa Bezdin means a shtar. Who says you found it in a busy location? Maybe you found it in a cul-de-sac, in a quiet area. But if you found it, that's the point. Rabbah read the Mishnah as Kol Maisa Bezdin Yachsa. That means that you found the shtar in Bezdin. Now Bezdin is very busy, so why are you allowed to return it? It must be that even if it's a busy location, I need a second thing to trigger the problem. Rav Zera says, who says that you found it in Bezdin? It says you just found a Maisa Bezdin. It means you found the shtar. It could be you found it in a quiet cul-de-sac. Says the Gemara, the Shtaga Bezdin Askina, and the Bezdin command the Masher's dummy. And Rav Zera Amalach, Mikatani, Kol Maisa Bezdin, Shanimsu Bezdin, never says where you found it. Kol Maisa Bezdin Yachsa Katani, Loyal Nishtach Chabroi, maybe you found it in a quiet location. So now all of this is because there's a contradiction, yeah? The contradiction is, our Mishnah implies that you could return a document even if it's found weeks later and we're not worried that two people with the same names and the same things dropped in the same spot. The Mishnah Gin is worried about that. So what's the answer? So Rabbah gives his answer, the answer is, where'd you find it? If it's busy and you got two people with the same name, then it's a problem. If it's not busy, it's fine. If it's not busy but not two, that's Rabbah's answer. Rav Yirmiyah has a very simple answer, and that is, what are you worried about? You find a document that says that Avi divorced Chana in Queens. Now, so the concern is, I go to Avi, he's married to Chana. I said, is your life awful? And he's like, yeah. And he said, did you divorce your wife? He's like, yeah. Or I wrote the document, whatever it is. So our Mishnah says, it's fine. The Mishnah again says, that's a problem, because maybe there's two Avis and Chanas. Okay. Well, the document has more than just the names. There's also Edom. So Rav Yirmiyah says, very simple. Call up the Edom and ask them, did you sign multiple Avi and Chanas? If the Edom say no, we only signed one document, then what are you worried about? It's very simple. So it says that Rav Yirmiyah going to Kamru Edom, the case in our Mishnah where you could return it. Meaning, I understand the concern that there's two Avis and Chanas. I get it. But then look at the Edom. The Edom says John Feinstein. So call up John Feinstein and say, you signed the documents for Avi and Chan in Queens? Yeah. How many? Did you sign two? If he says, I signed both. I signed two Avis and Chanas in Queens. So you got the same Edom. Okay, fine. I understand it. He's like, no, I didn't do that. I signed one. So what are you worried about? You got the Edom. You got the couple. What are you worried about?
Which one?
Huh?
Which one?
He says, I only signed...
Yeah, which one?
Yeah, but the husband can be playing games. He never did it. The
interesting.
on the name wasn't there.
It's a good kasha.
Yeah.
It's a good kasha. It's a good kasha.
My great kasha. For the record.
Okay. We'll get to it in a second. So Rav Yirmiyah says, let's go to the Gemara. We'll see in a second. Rav Yirmiyah could go into Kamru Edom. The Edom say, "Me'olim lechasamnu al get echad shel Yosef ben Shimon." The case is there's two Yosef ben Shimons in the city. So why does the Mishnah cool with it? Because the Edom only signed one. So says the Gemara, "Ihachi ma'la memra." It's pashut. Your kashas are so ridiculous. It's pashut that it's fine. So the Gemara says, "Ma'od the same elichas dilma isra mishma kishma ve'edim ke'edim." Maybe in the same city there's two Avis and Chanas, and they have two Edom have the same names. So it's two sets of Edom. Kamashmal, I know that there's only one set of Edom, and they say they signed that guy. So look, I think I didn't check, but this type of question is probably Taisus' question. So the bottom Taisus says, "Va'omer habal shu oisa Yosef im toimer haloika she'ein Edom oimrim kain ein anem eloim shu shaloi elonu choshev shema me'acher nafal v'ata she'edom oimrim shli chasan v'leget echad Your question, which is, there's two Yosef and Shimon's in the city. There's two Avis and Chanas. So how do you know it's his and not the other ones? Because the Edom only signed one. So how do you know they signed this? Maybe they signed the other ones. It's your question. So Taisa says, meaning the cases where the Edom say that we only signed one and we signed his. The Edom are identifying, the Edom are pulling him out. Then the question is, why are they Neman? The answer is, because for them to lie like that, there's no reason for them to do that. But that's the case. It has to be that the Edom are just saying that they signed, and they signed that couple, Avi and Chana, not the other Avi and Chana. Okay. That's then you're out. Then you're out. According to Rav Yirmiyah, then you're out. Or another answer, the Gemara says another answer. Rav Ashi Amar going to Kamru Nekev Yesh by B'tzadois Ploinus. You know what the case is? The case is that the person says, I have a simon. Meaning, what are you worried about? That there's two Yosef and Shimons that have it? He has a simon, that it's his shtar. That there's a certain hole by a certain nekev. There's a certain by a noise. So the Gemara says, you can't just say there's a hole in the document, because that could be a comment. You have a hole by a specific word. He says, I remember when the Edom signed it, by the Eid, there's a hole by the ayin. Okay, there is, and it's a simon like anything else. Says the Gemara with this. Ravashi Masafkale Simanim Idaraisa Derabana. Ravashi was unclear whether Simanim are Deraisa. Now look at the bottom two Rashis. Rashi Masafkale Ravashi Simanim Shemachzir Ben Aveda Idaraisahi Vafila Beisa Deraisa Samchinan Asimin Kaldu Idarabana Vedavka Aveda Shehefker Bezin Hefker Midisur Loy Samchinan. Now the question is basically Ravashi was unclear whether giving a simon is enough for a biblical concept or only rabbinic. You see, this would be an example where a simon would affect a biblical concept because you're affecting a get. Rav Ashi was unclear whether simanim are legitimate. They definitely will work for returning a lost object, but returning a lost object, worst case scenario, you're taking someone else's item, but there's hefker bez and hefker, which will make it not an act of theft. So it's at most a rabbinic issue. So for simanim, for a rabbinic issue, it's for sure fine. Rav Ashi was unclear whether simanim work for a biblical issue, so Rav Ashi would be unclear of whether... I guess Rav Ashi says
it's not a simon to make the get kosher, it's a simon about returning it. So that's a rabbinic. We're talking about rabbinic, not the kashrus of the get itself.
But it's affecting the right situation with man and wife. That's what you mean. Not the get.
Oh, no. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Rav Ashi is unclear whether simanim is deraisa or derabanan, meaning, one second. Fine. Now, okay, but yeah. Oh no! I'm right about that. Rav Ashi, although he said the case is where you gave a simon, he actually lahalacha is unsure whether it's legitimate enough to return a get. Meaning, although he said that's the case, he himself is unsure whether he would paskin like that. If simanim is deraisa, then you could return a get, and if not. So Rav Ashi, although he said that's the case, he wasn't sure. Now I'll just finish up with this. Rabbi Chana says, Irkis like it be midrasha. Rabbi Chana lost, he was a shliach to deliver a get, and he lost the get in the Beis Medrash. So Omar, he said he wanted it back. When they found it, he said, listen, Isimna Isli Begave. If you're looking for Simonim, I have them. Tviyas Eino, we're going to see in the next parak, there's a concept called Tviyas Ein, which is the Rabbanim are just trusted to say that they recognize it. He says, if you want a simon, I have a simon. Tviyas Eino, if you're going to go Tviyas Eino, it's like, I recognize it. They returned it. How'd you know they returned it? And he delivered the get. Omar, but they said, Lo yadana imishim simon majinile, because savi simonim deraisa. I don't know if he returned it because simonim, and this is a proof that simonim are legitimate even for biblical. Imishim tviyas ein ajine, or maybe they returned it because it's tviyas ayin, and daf kutsumar abanav inisham edeloy. Maybe simonim are not enough, and they returned it because of tviyas ayin. In which case, if you're not a rav, we wouldn't return it. So the question is this a good raya that you could return simonim in general? Undecided. All right, we'll stop here. I would listen to the daf in